Welcome, everybody. It's February 12th, 2024, and this is the Open Lab seminar of the Cultural Data Analytics Era Chair project in Tallinn University. And with the greatest pleasure today, we have the sort of crowd that will organize the next Cultural Data Analytics Conference in 2025. Which is Juan-Luis Suarez and a whole crowd of people doing cultural data analytics at Western University in Canada. And so with the greatest pleasure, we look forward to, I think, a string of short talks and then like sort of awesome discussions. And with that, I basically sort of would give over the stage to you, Juan-Luis, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, thank you, Max, and thank you, Tallinn University and the Kudal Lab for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to participate in the conversation. We have a big crowd of people from the Cultureplex lab, which is very diverse in backgrounds, both cultural and disciplinary. And we also have the team from San Sebastian, Spain, led by Gustavo Schwartz, with Alejandro Michio and Pascalis Agapitos, who reside in a physics institute. They do materials physics most of the time, but they also do a lot of cultural analytics and cultural work related to arts and science. And we have been collaborating also for a while. So Gustavo will be representing them and showing on some of the work that they have been doing. What we have is a very short round of introductions, so you have an idea of who we are, and then we'll go into the first short talk, if that's okay with you. Is that what you were thinking about, Max?
Yeah, excellent. Super
okay,
cool.
So I'm going to be naming people as I have them in my screens.
Yeah, maybe
introduce themselves and then we'll go into the talk. So I have first, I'm Juan-Luis Suarez, originally from Spain. My background is both in philosophy and literature. I have been running the Cultureplex lab since 2008 or 9, funded by the agency that funds infrastructure of research in Canada, the Canada Foundation for Innovation. And the original mission was to develop a research program in digital humanities. In our case, very much focus on both the disciplinary advancement of digital humanities and cultural networks analysis. Okay, so that's basically it. We are getting hopefully into a second lab if we are lacking an application that we have put together to divest ourselves into immersive experiences as a way of both doing new research and also focusing even more the undergrad program in digital humanities. Okay, with this, I turn it off to Sina, please, very fast, your introduction.
Good morning. My name is Zaina Degame. I'm currently working with cultural assets, the activation of objects as a means to preserve heritage and develop different cultural programming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Connected to the Aga Khan Museum in Toronto, part of the work that Sina does. Celia, I have you next.
Good morning. My name is Celia. I'm also from Spain, and I'm a PhD student in the Hispanic Studies program here at Western. My background is in literature and also in poetry, and I'm working with poetry and immersive experiences.
Cool. Thank you, Celia. Luis?
Hello, everyone. My name is Luis. I'm a software engineer, graduated from the University of Informatics Science in the Havana, Cuba. Today I'm going to be talking to you about designing immersive experience, so be ready for that, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Luis. Yadira?
Hello, everyone. I'm Yadira Lizama, also a software engineer, also from Cuba. I did my PhD in Hispanic Studies at the Cultureplex lab under the supervision of Professor Juan-Luis, and I'm also doing my postdoc. I recently started my postdoc working also on cultural networks and artificial intelligence, but my main application is on transitional digital methods for violations against children during war. Thank you.
Thank you, Yadira. Pilar?
The mic.
Not working?
Now.
It's very
That
low.
works? Sorry, Pilar, I work on social media analytics. Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, have Mario next.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mario Cabal. I am from Colombia. I am a PhD student as well. My focus interest is victims of the conflict because my background is in peace studies and conflict resolution.
Emilio, sorry.
Hello, yeah, my name is Emilio Calderón Reyes, and the main area of my research is the digital transformation at cultural institutions such as museums and libraries. Today I will be talking about a different project, which is more about social analytics, but I will be happy to share my research with you.
Thank you, Emilio. Barbara?
Hi, my name is Barbara. My background is in art history, and I work with network analysis and visual culture.
Nice.
Thank you. Anna?
Hello, I'm Anna. I am a computer graphics engineer and PhD student at Hispanic Studies. I am designing a methodology that uses networks as pedagogical tools for teaching and evaluation of digital humanities courses in mixed reality environments. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Anna. And then I have Javier.
Hi, everyone. I'm from Mexico. I'm also a PhD candidate at Hispanic Studies, and I focus on video games and Latino representation and landscape representation.
Okay, and one thing I have to clarify is not that I am completely biased towards Hispanic people. I promise I like all types of people. But as we have talked many times with Mike, the difficulties of starting new disciplines is that you have to use the current structures to build up on them. And the PhD that we have to do that and to do digital humanities here is the PhD in Hispanic Studies that has all the fellowship that we can get to around people. So in many cases now we have in the doctoral examinations the following question: what does this have to do with Hispanic studies? And sometimes we have some problems to answer that, but you have to play with what you have. Okay, so very fast, if you would like, from San Sebastian, I have Gustavo first. If you want to introduce yourself very fast.
Well, I am a physicist. I am doing research. I belong to the Spanish National Research Council, and I am doing research in material science. But during the night, I go into the dark side, and I'm working in the humanities also. And I am trying to build bridges between science and humanities since maybe 15 years ago.
Nice.
Thank you, Gustavo. Alejandro?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alejandro Mixio. I'm also a physicist working in polymer science. And well, I started collaborating with Gustavo. He introduced me to all this work maybe 3 years ago or so. So yes, he will show some work we are doing.
Thank you, Alejandro. And then Pascalis.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pascalis. I'm part of Gustavo's Dark Side team in Donostia International Physics Center. I'm a PhD student, and I'm working on complex networks applied to cultural analytics.
Okay, I think this is all on our side. Max, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, or you want us to just go into the talks, or.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you should. This is not the whole team, but I can maybe give a little summary. So we're the area chair for cultural data analytics, which is place which sort of brings together originally 6 PhD students and 6 postdoc fellows, plus the area chairholder, which is myself, to sort of like come up with a novel approach of cultural data analytics. And this novel approach is sort of, how should I say, developed by all the 12 fellows having sort of their own sort of motivation. They come out of a source discipline, but then collaborate across all disciplines. And this is literally from cultural semiotics and cultural history, art history, all the way to machine learning art, computational linguistics, computational social science, and sociocultural physics. And we also work basically across eras. So we look at classic art, but we also look at Tinder profiles in Estonia, or basically Soviet newsreels and so on. So, or Flickr pictures in Rome and so on. And so basically the idea is really to sort of like have the whole bandwidth. Obviously you cannot cover sort of comprehensively sort of all the possibility space, but as most of you are aware, we have done this cultural data analytics conference, which sort of like lined out more or less by the emergent contributions what the actual space is. And there it became very clear that cultural data analytics, even if you don't take into account the natural science aspect, is firmly going beyond what sort of the coverage of digital humanities and computational humanities conferences is, because there is a larger focus and more work on visual art and audiovisual arts, like performing arts and so on. And also this natural science aspect is, I think, a really interesting one. And I think this is sort of something which I'm really happy about today. I usually, when I talk long enough over dinner conversation, or somebody asks me in front of a talk, what am I doing? People are very alienated by the fact that I do things. I worked in a physics lab and I do network analysis, but I'm also a classical art historian. So this doesn't compute for people. And, there's a bunch of places you can point to. And one of these places is obviously Juan-Luis's lab, which uses complexity as part of the name, Cultureplex lab, since 15 years. You do network analysis at scale. So you do that in art history. So particular art historians who always give me this kind of question, while at the same time, and I think that is a very important thing, the open-mindedness that sort of makes this kind of innovation in art history, in cultural research possible, also goes the other direction. So it's not like, we have heard there is at least one person, 2 people actually, I think, doing conflict resolution research, which also is something which Juan-Luis has a long tradition, and in places where this was super necessary, like Colombia and so on. And so this is sort of something which what we can also learn. And so one other thing which you gave this sort of defensive comments, like the whole group is sort of Hispanic, but what we need to acknowledge and harness as a sort of like opportunity to learn is that people are coming from many, many different countries. And the Hispanic world in the humanities is just as large as the Anglo-Saxon world, the French world, and the German world taken together, minimum, and plus Italy. And what is a very important point, which I would love to sort of like preface before you start giving your talks, is it is for those who are familiar with art history in particular, very clear that French people, Italian people, German people, and English-speaking people in art history tend to cite each other, but not the Hispanic literature, while the Hispanic literature tends to cite all of them and has a corpus of material that is way larger. And, if you're in Puebla, Mexico, it doesn't escape you that the Baroque cannot be understood without also taking into account the Chinese context, for example, right? This is a kind of stuff which I think is sort of something where the European and the American crowd can learn a lot. And obviously on the North American continent, the Latinx culture is obviously also a huge factor. It's not like that this is some kind of foreign thing, but it's the mainstream who sort of like just doesn't take into account what was happening, not only in the last 300 years, but also in the last 50 years. And I think that is something which just needs to be fixed. So with that, we're very curious about what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Max. I don't remember who is going first in the talks today.
Yadira is the chief.
Yadira is the chief operating officer.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, in the plan it was Emilio, but I guess I tried to give like a narrative to the presentations to concatenate them, and whatever you prefer.
So Emilio, do you want to go first?
Yeah, but Yadira, if you have something prepared to present all of us, or
No, just share
No,
your screen.
okay, let's go. Yeah, I'm sorry to have you waiting there. I just need to. Jada, I'm having some sort of technical issues. Perhaps would it be better if we start with Luis, and I will send you my presentation so that you via email?
Okay. Then,
yeah, okay.
Then let's start with Luis. And
I'm going to share my screen now.
Cool.
You can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
1 second, please. Okay, let's start. Hello again. My name is Luis Enrique Reyes Pérez, and today I'm going to be talking to you about designing immersive experiences. This is a brand new topic to our lab, and we are very excited to share it with you. But first, I want to introduce myself again. As you saw, I am a software engineer, graduated from the University of Informatics Sciences in the Havana, Cuba in 2022. I have more than 2 years of experiences in the software industry, working as a software developer in SaaS application. I'm also an artificial intelligence enthusiast and researcher. And now I'm currently studying my master's degree here at Western University. Today, I'm going to share with you some of the advances that I have in one of my course projects. It is titled Between Brushes and Algorithms, a contemporary interpretation of Afro-Cuban religion through the art of Wilfredo Lam. Wilfredo Lam was a Cuban artist. He born in Sabana Grande, Cuba. In 1902, he was a direct descendant of a Chinese father and a mother, a Cuban mother with Spanish and African ancestry. He definitely is one of the most important American artists of the 20th century, and his work was highly inspired by the Cuban religion, especially Santeria and Yoruba religion, and the Cubism style, also the Surrealism, and some of his friends like Pablo Picasso or the novelist Alejo Carpentier. And the objectives that I have to that I want to achieve with this research is to explore the religious influence that shapes the Wilfredo Lam's work, examining the connection between his personal experience, his Afro-Cuban heritage, and his interaction with his spiritual practices. And also, I want to analyze the distinctive characteristic of Afro-Cuban religious iconography present in the work The Green Morning, The Jungle, and another one known as Dragons by the same author. I want to identify the symbolic and spiritual elements that can be transferred and reinterpreted in the digital medium. At the end of this research, I want to develop and create a series of digital work of art that capture the essence and the spiritual richness of the Afro-Cuban culture based on the selected paintings. In this slide, I want to show you some of the paints that I have selected for this work. The first one is The Jungle. It was created in 1943, 2 years after Wilfredo Lam returned to Cuba from Europe. Here we can see a very unusual landscape with a lot of weird shapes like crescent faces or rounded backsides, skinny arms and legs. This is, as I said, a very unusual landscape. I think the author wanted to work with our perception, something like that. The second work was The Green Morning, also created in the same year. This represents a woman in a sugarcane plantation. In the Afro-Cuban religion, this image represents a person who is possessed by the spirits. Also, we can see a lot of fruits, musk, and tobacco leaves. This is a very unusual, usual thing in the Afro-Cuban religion and culture. The last painting it had no name, but some person knows it as Drowned. It was created 10 years after the two previous one. Here we can see a lot of sharp shapes and a lot of contrast between all of the colors that represent this great composition of the painting. Now, for this work, I am using a tool that is called Torch Designer, and it is described as its home developers like a visual development platform that equips you with the tools you need to create stunning real-time projects and rich user experience. From my own point of view, I could say that it is perfect for real-time projects and interactive installation. It has a very intuitive user interface and workflow. It's very easy to use due to its low learning curve, but allows us to have a fast prototyping of any idea that we could have. Also, a big advantage is that it uses Python as a scripting language, and when we need some more detail or some more power, we can use C++ too. What I want to show you in this slide is one of the projects that I have created based on the last painting that I have showed you. This is the interface, a small part of the network that I have developed in Torch Designer. And in this case, I am using a technique that is called optical flow. This is the main component that is part of the Torch Designer that allows me to create that optical flow. And with that, what I want to get is the movement to my webcam. In the main composition, I have created a lot of moving part. You will see it in later. Moving part with a stable diffusion, generated a new image for this project. The movement that I captured within my webcam move also this figure. There is another component that is an audio of traditional African music that also move the main composition. Now, for the jungle, I also have generated some images using stable diffusion, and here I use a technique that is called image instancing. That with this technique, we can make like a mesh or a grid of objects. In this case, they are boxes, each box is painting with the color of the original image, and all the image will be switching according to another audio that also controls the movement of the image, and with that controls the movement or the boxes in the grid. Also, this is the representation of the network. You will see later that is these networks are really big, are really complex and flexible. In this slide, you will see a small video demo of the network and the techniques. You will see all the nodes that are involved in the creative process, all the images that are generated in the Stable Diffusion. And now I hope you can enjoy a small part of the final.
Mhm.
This is the second project that I have talked to you. Inside of this component, there is the image instancing process. A lot of nodes too. And this is the final result.
And that's reacting to the basically the input of the user. Okay. Mhm. Can you explain how this feedback loop with Stable Diffusion is working? So you basically have some kind of template. You have the 3D model, you have the color distribution, and then you take some information from the camera. So how do you? I mean, there's obviously aesthetic decisions you have to make of what to feed and what to react to. The same is true for the music. Is that something? Kind of a process that you just have prototyped, or did you obviously one could probably spend another half year on just like thinking about exactly how these parts are now coupled, right? Is that true?
Yeah, for this work, I'm prototyping right now. I am just putting a lot of ideas inside of it, but here I have created a lot of images with Stable Diffusion, and that images are translated into this mesh. And the audio controls the movement between all of the images. The images are changing constantly, and that movement controls the boxes inside of the mesh. Right now, this project has no interaction with the webcam. The webcam is controlled by the previous project.
Interesting.
The audio part, I am working right now. I think I could do also think with generative AI to generate an audio for this part too. But currently, I'm working with African music, traditional African music.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, say that. I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. If you have any question, concern, suggestion, don't hesitate to contact me. That's my email. And thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Luis. Luis arrived from Cuba in September, and we throw him into this. We're experimenting literally as we go with the idea of doing a couple of things this year. One for March open house, when students and families come. Hope to have something that they show that they can have a taste of how this works. And later in the year, we have a couple of projects, one with the central bank in Colombia that will hope to materialize in rendering a novel called La Vorágine, the Vortex, into an immersive experience, and another one with a 10-volume bibliography about my region, Extremadura, that will hopefully be funded by one of the foundations there. And again, the idea is to convert the textual base into an immersive experience, but we're just starting the whole thing.
Prototype.
Yeah. So, Emilio, are you ready?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. So, Yadira, can you share my presentation, please?
I'm trying.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I can start. So, Zoom meeting. Okay, great. So, yeah, as we all know, cyberspace has become this key battleground in which the public image of institutions is built and also contested. And with that into account, this project poses first like a methodology that could be used perhaps by other people in the future to understand something that I define as lexical antagonism. And then part of this study involves applying it to a specific case of social unrest and policing in Latin America regarding different contexts. So in this case, the working definition that I have been using is that lexical antagonism refers to this measurable difference between the word choices used by an institution in its public communications and groups of netizens who are talking about that same institution. So it regards that sort of difference that can be measured. In this specific case, it's mostly a lexical analysis. Perhaps in the future, we would like be really interesting to look in other dimensions of language, but for the time being, we're sticking to lexical antagonism. So please can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, as far as the methodology goes, like the initial steps are about defining the specific domain that we're looking to, and especially in terms of its the relevance of studying it, and to frame as much as possible this sort of circumstance that define it. The middle stages are mostly like standard data analytics in terms of getting data, processing it, and of course describing it like in a more basic sense. And what I would like to focus on this presentation is more like the final part of like once you get the data and once you have cleaned it up, how you are able to try to measure what I was referring to previously about lexical antagonism. So for that matter, I will be mostly using two key metrics. The first is Gaussian similarity. The way I see it, the more lexical, the lowest the Gaussian similarity is of a comparison between two texts, a group of texts by an institution with comparison to group of texts by users talking about that same institution. So the lower this value is, it will be an indication of higher lexical antagonism, because it is of course a measure of difference. In that sense, if you see it like from an inverted perspective. And while Gaussian similarity can be really helpful for us to compare different sort of situations, different sort of countries or different sort of institutions to one another, also in addition to that magnitude of lexical antagonism, it's also important to see which are the specific directions of that semantic difference. And for that, I'm using TF, IDF, which is also a metric widely used in NLP, in natural language processing. And it's really helpful for us to perhaps to pinpoint which are like the specific terms that are generating the most polarization between the language of these two sort of groups. And for this presentation, also something that I have been testing to see which is the better way to capture, especially for long periods of time, how the evolution of these discourses has been going on. I have tried to use these same sort of techniques and trying to divide the sort of periods that I'm studying with different criteria. One of them is to use like a very regular sort of periodization, such as a monthly or a daily basis, to see the changes, to what extent they're happening in real time, or to what extent they take to materialize. And also I have been making some experiments about using, because like the distribution of this data, it tends to have a really high kurtosis, in the sense that there are a few days in which most of the content is produced, especially in which there's usually something that happened in like the analog world, something that a news event, something of a conflict, of a specific situation, that they tend to trigger a lot of discourse regarding like the sort of crisis that these communications face. Yadira, can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so like to better like illustrate what I have been working with in this methodology, the first thing that I have been doing for the case study to highlight the methodology will be to frame this case study in terms of social unrest in Latin America, which has been rising in the last few decades, especially in regards to its digital manifestations. And something that has happened recently a lot is that with this sort of social unrest and protests, police are usually the first institution of the state that it's being called to sort of control what is happening. So they're usually, that's why I have chosen for this study to study the police accounts with what other users are saying about police accounts in different Latin American countries that we have selected. For that reason, of course, we have defined the specific time frame that we're studying. I have also, in this case, a platform as Twitter, which at the time was most prominent in this sort of social unrest that was happening. And of course, in addition to the big countries and the nations, also some of the queries involve like looking to the largest metropolitan areas of Latin America, because they're usually when the places in which most of the largest protests took place. And so, as I was saying, the main purpose of this study is to compare what the official accounts of the police say over other groups of users. So for that reason, I use a filter just to take at a maximum 2 tweets per other user. So to more or less balance it out, and especially because there were like groups of users who were extremely active. So I in a way wanted to weight it out, like all of users more or less in the same scale. Yadira, if you can go to the next one, please. Yeah, so for the results that I have been obtaining so far, of course, I'm comparing the different police accounts with other users, and the search criteria that I use were like based on countries. So mostly this study comparing 15 different countries of Latin America. And so the results, first of all, enable me to compare what are the countries in which these levels of cosine similarities based on, and so lexical antagonism tend to be higher, and which are the ones in which it tends to be lower. But still, I'm having some issues understanding the results that I'm getting, because it's when I look to the semantics of the terms that have the highest ID TDF frequencies, or that are the most prominent using that sort of metrics, a lot of the terms that have like these really high scores, in the case such as Colombia, which tend to be really violent, such as asesinar, which means to assassinate, matar, which means to kill, they do appear in the countries in which also the scores sometimes are the lowest ones, or in terms of lexical antagonism. So I have probably, that's one of the things that I have been finding in these results, which I was not expecting it, is like these sort of discrepancies, which I'm still trying to make sense of it. And can you go to the next slide, please? So yeah, like to frame it all together, like the results that I have been observing indicate an overall noticeable degrees of lexical antagonism, even if with the different time ways that I have been using, especially in terms of the periodization of data. And besides that, what I have been talking about, there are many instances in which these top terms by TDF tend to refer to to events that I can pinpoint to exact events that happened, like that were covering the news. So that's something that we were also expecting to be this sort of high correlation, at least from a qualitative standpoint of view, between the activity at this sort of platform, which was being covered in the news coverage at the time. There's that also considered large of extent, and also like some interpretations that the top terms by term frequency inverse help us understand, like to pinpoint which are the sort of polemics that are at the center of these disputes. Jada, if you can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, to narrow it down, this work that is still in progress has enabled me to like see that on the one hand, it's really useful to have like a sort of overall magnitude of lexical antagonism, which in this case, Cousin singularity has been proved really useful. But that at the same time, and that's probably the stage that I'm right now, at the moment of really discussing the results and trying to understand what is really happening in these specific cases and which are the sort of topics that are at the center of these disputes, we also need to include other sort of metrics in that discussion to better also, probably this is a work that involves combining these sort of quantitative measures of language with also like a more qualitative discourse analysis to understand how these all fit together. So thank you so much. That's what we have been doing in this project so far.
Cool. Thank you very much. Do you have, so is there a kind of, is there a kind of complementarity between the police accounts and the regular public? Because like one thing is similarity, and the other thing is if they're not similar at all, that they're sort of like fill different niches in their space, right? And sort of talk about things that the other side doesn't say, but anticipates or takes for granted or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have not think about that keyword of complementarity. Also something that came to my mind with your question, which I believe it's not what you were asking to, but probably I would also be interested to see how these accounts from the police compare to one another. Perhaps that will be my approach to analyze that complementarity. I don't know if you see that fitting somehow.
Mm-hmm. One thing we're doing in a project where it deals with Ukraine is we're not only looking at like peaks, but what happens before and after the peak, like what's the shape of these curves, right? And that is sort of related to other conflict situations, which I sort of encourage you to look into, which is the Gezi protest in Istanbul, which was really interesting in terms of the onset and sort of like the decay. And also, you know, what they did also was looking at like the communities of people. And you could actually see that like during the peak, you know, there was like one community. You either were for or against the protest, basically. While before and after, there was like people were like in 100 different clubs, like, you know, you were in your church choir or your fishing club or your, I don't know, shoe appreciation society, whatever, right? And so that is a kind of thing which is quite interesting, that there's a lot of work in these kind of like areas regarding these kind of events. And I think this is a really interesting thing that you mentioned also, that in a side sentence, that it's a high kurtosis phenomenon where like most of the action happens in a few sort of like days, like, you know, out of like 100 days, there's like 10 where there's something interesting. And I think that is sort of something which culture-wise in general, people underestimate, right? Like in the humanities, we talk constantly about a typical blah, blah, blah looks like this and that, or a typical like this and that. But actually we're talking about these peak phenomena in general. Like, you know, a painter that is well known is a peak phenomenon, while most painters are unknown. But most of the action happens in the unknown. That is a really interesting thing too, right? So it's not like that the antagonism isn't there in day-to-day life. You just don't live it out. You don't shout at a policeman who just walks down the street, right? Or vice versa. And so that is sort of like a really interesting thing too, that we only get the signal of processes which are sort of like under the radar, because you don't get the sort of like, you know, it doesn't come to the open basically. You can study the phenomenon, but you cannot sort of like have the internal sort of like processes. It's a really interesting thing. Should we take questions in between, Juan-Luis, or should we just like keep going?
We can discuss if you have questions. I see a physics hand over there with metrics questions, I'm sure.
Yes, I will ask about mathematics. When Emilio, when you compare the number of tweets between different countries, I assume that you compare raw numbers, right? I mean, you take the total number of tweets in one country and in other country, and I wonder whether this is fair or maybe you need to normalize or to take some baseline. Do you understand what I mean? Because maybe the activity is not equally important in all the countries. Okay, so maybe it is necessary some normalization in order to compare different countries or even different cities within a given country. Okay, so probably you need some kind of normalization. Maybe you need to take some baseline and how many messages above that baseline you have. And I don't know. This is just I am thinking aloud, let's say.
Yeah, sure. Great. Yeah, so I can answer like some of my thought process for that. Initially, I collected the data for 19 Latin American countries, and I did have like this baseline that I had to exclude some countries because like the amount of data was not enough, either like in absolute terms or in terms of the representation of the police or the activity of these police accounts, because that's one of the reasons why I had to exclude Mexico, which of course there was a lot of data from it, but I didn't really have like this sort of media presence of the police to serve as like, because the main comparison points is, of course, I'm seeing different sort of countries, 19 countries, and in each of these countries, I'm comparing the data set that I collected using query terms regarding to that specific police force at the national level with the data of other users who were talking about that same police officer. So in that sense, I'm not using that data to compare police tweets from different countries or what users from different groups from different countries are saying to one another, but it's mostly just looking to these different 17 pairs of police forces and citizens talking about that same police officer. Still, I believe I could consider more ways to use normalization in this analysis. Of course I do.
Okay, thanks.
Did you think about like, obviously this is an interesting thing which we don't know, so it needs to be measured. Like even before normalizing, the key question is there a difference? Like obviously we look at the data sort of aggregate. It's one sort of problem to differentiate tweets by country, which is a really interesting thing because, you can totally sit in Bogota and bullshit about police in Mexico, I guess, right? And so the question is, how do you disambiguate? Probably by IP address or whatever. But then as you separate these events, like if you have your 19 countries and you form a timeline for each of these countries, for example, like is there a different threshold? Is there a different inter-event time? Like what does it actually mean for different countries? Like, to be a peak, for example. That is, I think, a really, really interesting question. And there, in some sense, the heterogeneity of your data, the fact that there is such a high kurtosis, that there is a lot of peak events and then like usually nothing happens, can actually be your friend. Because, there's like, you don't need to talk about standard deviations at that point because there is either something or not. And then the inter-event time between the peaks becomes more interesting. And there probably another question which reviewers may ask is, what's the fraction of people tweeting in that country, right? I mean, if in Bogota there's 8 million people, but only 100,000 tweets, while, in, I don't know, some other country in a 3 million city, there is 300,000 tweets where, I don't know, seemingly in Buenos Aires, everybody tweets while in Colombia nobody tweets? That is a really interesting question, because there, for sure, there's heterogeneity, as we know, in these kind of things, and different countries rely on different social networks for different reasons and stuff like that. So that is sort of something which would be interesting to know, and it should be fairly easy to plot in a sense, because you know, just compare it to the population of the place and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And there you also, actually, this is another question regarding this, which is like, who's tweeting? Because, you know, if like, just think about, maybe there is some geocodes, you know, in a place like in Caracas, if you're tweeting from the hill or in the main city, that's a huge difference. If there is some rich white dude tweeting, or somebody who is not a rich white dude. I think that is a really important question too, because all these places cannot be put into, you know, they're not average by themselves either. That it is, I think, a really interesting thing. But as you have the 3 million tweets, there must be, at least in the large places, something there to actually make at least qualitative characterizations about this. Sorry to bombard you with like things that
yeah. Yeah, those are like the valuable questions, and some of them we have been considering them in this process, some others we haven't, and of course I would like to address them. Perhaps something that comes to my mind in this case is that, yeah, of course, we wanted to use first like this geolocation feature, and for the data that I obtained, it was really not that representative sample that it had. Like usually less than 20% of the tweets in these collections have some sort of geo reference, and in some cases it may not be even that reliable. So the way in which we have approached this problem has been, in a way, of course, it's like a big assumption for this study. It's in a way to try to separate, to try to consider what is happening in Twitter, like as a specific digital sphere, which to some extent may overlap with what people are really thinking or not. We're also like well familiarized with this notion of a lot of fan boots, and like I believe we have reasons to distrust what is that what may be being said in this sort of digital arenas may not really fit like the overall discourse of a country, which of course has so many different public spheres that cannot be covered just in a single network. So in a way, like the sort of assumptions that I have been working with has been to see, and I have been probably really careful the way in which I've been framing this when I write about it, about describing what is happening in this specific social account. And one of the reasons why I'm using public institutions so much, or that plays such a crucial role in shaping this research, is that I'm not really talking about the countries by itself, but just by what the official accounts are saying versus what other accounts are saying about those same institutions. So in a way, the institutions are what I'm really able to grasp like in a tangible way in these sort of discourses, because I'm really not sure if people, perhaps some of these tweets may be coming from Russia or from China or from the States. So it's more like seeing what is happening with these institutions and how they're framed, how are they navigating these public debates in these digital settings.
Thank you very much. There's no hands up, but let me, before we go on to the next talk, let's just draw a little connection. So one of the interesting things in the first talk was maybe how many have heard of Touch Graph Designer before? Not that many, right? So Touch Graph Designer is a standard kind of like tool like Maximus P in performing art to do music and graphical and sort of projection mapping, you know, when people project moving images onto buildings and stuff like that. So you can simulate a 3D world and interact with it. What is interesting, this kind of like graph of little boxes you have seen, is quite interesting because in animation movies, like in Maya or something like that, you know, we have a character rig where you put some texture on top, typically hidden behind what you see, like the stuff that doesn't look like a frame of Shrek, but the stuff happening in the background is looking like that. It's sort of like a so-called call function graph, where every little box is like a piece of program and it has some input and some output. This is really interesting because this comes from sort of like interactive generative art performance, which very much smells like modular synthesis in music, where people have like 40, 50 years of really, really deep interactive experience with, while at the same time, you know, it's sort of like, it smells like an artistic research product, but there is a resonance with what we just heard in this other project with Twitter. So we have, you know, data acquisition, data preparation, data analysis, visualization, interpretation. It's like a pipeline, right? And in the end, there's a paper. Now, this is really interesting because there too, you have sort of some kind of flow in boxes with some feedback, because you figure out, oh, the data is not sufficient. I have to collect more data. I have to bring in this other sort of like algorithm and stuff like that. And so one interesting thing is, I think this is very rarely happening. That's the reason I pointed out. We have people sitting in a room doing something like touch graph designer, where interaction is just their daily bread and business. And you need not that many boxes for this to become complicated. While at the same time, there is people who try to narrow down this to a pipeline where you have some reliable sort of result of evidence at the very end, while you interact with your boxes or your virtual boxes in a much, much, much slower way, because you actually want this to be static. But actually, I'm dreaming about this since like 15 years, and I'm not the first one. There's people who dream about this since 55 years. It would be great if we could get that interactive with actual proper science, which is a really, really interesting challenge. And I'm pretty sure that some of us in this room will be part of projects like this in the next decades, because this is panning out. It's not just artificial intelligence. And I think, you know, basically, Luis can probably vouch for that. Using something like stable diffusion in the loop, you know, it's just slightly more complicated than just relying on the kind of stuff where, you know, if you have a piece of music and make that be interactive with your result, that is probably pretty crazy too, in terms of the implication that can happen. And I think these kind of things of what are the complications that happen and what are the kind of like things that are stable, these are discussions that between these projects one could have that utterly do not smell like English literature or digital humanities or humanities, but are part of these projects. And performing artists, particularly computational ones, have huge experience in that. So this is sort of something which I would love to sort of like see negotiated further in these kind of works where, you know, think about the moment when you do a research project, was like, oh, actually, where could this be more like touch graph designer? And if you do something like touch graph designer, it's like, where could this be more like science? What are the knobs I can fix? And I don't need 10 boxes, but actually just one that is like a really cool function, whatever. So I think that is a sort of, I don't know, this is why I find these two things exciting. But let's add another break with another talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. Let me just ask you something back. We can think about it and maybe talk about it later. One of the things that we're considering with the gaps that we have in the Twitter project is to what extent, and my question is, have you noticed anything like that in your own work in Ukraine and in Istanbul? Are the police accounts, and I haven't read the bibliography about this, or the Ministry of Interior accounts so effective these days that they can play crisis management in Twitter by hiring off-the-shelf companies and agents that can bridge the gap between the discourse of the government, the police, whatever the tendency it is, and what these people revolting against them are saying, so that you are able to think about the problem of flow and events, which is a big philosophical issue, how you separate the event from the flow, from a process. In periods, like as you said, okay, what was happening before the peak, what was happening during the peak, what was happening after the peak, and how long those periods really last. Or is this a natural dynamic of Twitter, that things last one day, a few hours, and they go away no matter what the semantic content of them is?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like we're working on something with Peter Dodds in Vermont, like Mark Metz, who's actually in the room. And so we're taking the safe option, working with like some very narrow topic from 2008 to 2023, but obviously very cautiously in the last 1.5 years. And I mean, the whole project is basically all about this, like, what can we even say, right? I know what you're talking about. Like, I have been during this Amok terror thing in Munich, which was not a terror attack, but that I only found out later. I was at the other end of the subway and I had to walk home 20 kilometers. And so the interesting thing there was the Twitter account of the Munich police was really essential in order to keeping calm. Like, everybody was like listening to that Twitter account all the time for like 24 hours. And that was really effective. And I think something like that could never happen again, because like Twitter has become this cesspool of like weird bullshit, like under the leadership of Elon Musk. And I'm, you know, that's like, I'm actually sort of like, I have the same question you have. I don't know. Like, I frankly do not know. And the fact that it worked so well in this like really crazy situation, that the whole population sort of kept calm, and was what was a major factor in that. Like, you know, not having that, like, I don't know where I would turn to. It's like, you know, it's like my Facebook account doesn't even work, I guess, on my phone. So this is like sort of like something which is a kind of crazy situation where people are, maybe we're not aware how much Twitter was really sort of actually part of the infrastructure, which has naturally merged, and now it's gone. And so that is, I'm not sure how to answer your question. It's like I just add another more desperate question on top, I guess.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, maybe we can go into the next talk. Who is?
Hello, everyone. Hello again. So the project that I'm going to talk about is a project that we've been developing for a few summers, but going on and off, because and now we are trying to getting back at it as I'm starting my postdoc. The project is, the title of the presentation is Narrating the Future, Learning from Biographical Events from Wikipedia. And it's kind of, as we were developing this project with Emilio about the events on social unrest through the lenses of Twitter data, or X data now, we were thinking about how we can extend this or theorize a little bit about these digital events, real events, and this connection between what happens in the digital world and how can we tell a story, or how can we tell narratives or predict what's going on through the analysis of these events. So we went through to Wikipedia. So we said, okay, and there's a lot of components that converge in this topic. And we said, first, the natural language process, how we can describe the events and how we can characterize these events through the language that is used while the event is happening, right? So there's a lot of natural language processing, the language produced by the events, but on and offline, and also the applications of artificial intelligence and the processing of the data. We also have this work that on cultural networks that intersect with this work, because Juan-Luis has been developing this for a while, for more than a decade. And it's this idea of how to understand entities that participate in the events, but not only humans, like people, but also the context, how we can describe the context by places, objects, dates, interactions, etc., and the relations. And kind of thinking of this as a medium to model human behavior with the idea of how we can generate future narratives or predict future events. And also the idea of uncovering the past to understand what's going on right now and also to generate or predict the future. And the data set that we turn into because of the characteristics of the data. First, because it's available free, and we said, okay, let's go to Wikipedia and let's see what's in there, right? And how we can translate, or how can we create events or learn with the events in the Wikipedia. And we went to analyze we focus in the part of Wikipedia that only talks about biographies, right? Of important people, and I say quote because there's I mean, it's through the opinion or the idea of the people who write the Wikipedia, right? But the biographies of important people and the historical events that are already recorded in Wikipedia. And there's a lot of data on that. We were able to, when we started scraping all the data and gathering all the documentation and tools that we need for this, we said, okay, let's go, let's establish two main goals for this first stage of the project. And the first is condense the global data set of non-fictional small events, and I'm going to talk about later about why small, and then enable the study and understanding of global history with different types of tools or methods that we could create to understand this history, right? Fact-checking, events and entities, intersection, cause and effect relations, etc. Multi-source comprehensive information about the events, etc. And the second goal was to kind of work towards generating or producing new narratives composed of the after learning of this huge knowledge graph of events that we like to call the Wikipedia Events Database. The current approach that we found in the literature is huge. There's a large development on things identifying events on Wikipedia, and it's mainly done by the Event KG project, which is they have been established like an ontology where they describe the events, like the people that participate in them, the language, like a series, if they belong to a series, for example, I don't know, the Super Bowl, it happens every year, right? So there's a large series of events, of that particular event that happen every year. And they have a kind of an ontology, and they have done a lot of work gathering data and also playing with those in order to construct a bigger narrative. The approach that we want to give to this project is kind of complementary, or is kind of in a different path, in the sense that we consider that learning from the biographies, or detecting events in the biographies of the persons, we can identify small events that can contribute or can give much more to the narratives that we are not seeing probably right now, because they're not described as big events in history, right? But they might contribute to understand these big events. So it's kind of learning and identifying events from the life of the person that lived through them, but also give importance to small events that can be these turnarounds, or that can influence the happening of other bigger events that are recorded in these projects. In that sense, we're working to work on creating the Wikipedia, the events database. And for us, the event, as I was mentioning, describe an important action, and important in quotes, because we have kind of sort of determined what is important, right? Associated to a person, including the action, the verb, dates, and it can include dates, places, participants, entities. So far, what makes important, what makes an event important is the inclusion of context. And it can be a complete sentence, but not necessarily. So there's no relation between the grammar structure and if we determine that an event is an event, right? We also identify between direct and indirect events. And for example, direct is when it's directly related to the person. For example, the Royal Swedish Academy of Science awarded Marie Curie the Nobel Prize in Physics. Indirect event, it could be that Poland declared 2011 the year of Marie Curie during the International Year of Chemistry. It is direct, it is related to Marie Curie, but she was not there, she didn't perform the action. It's other people that create something related to her, but it's kind of indirectly related to her. So in that sense, the methodology is 4 steps: data collection and cleaning. We've been able to collect 185,000 biographies from Wikipedia. There's a lot of more, but for this stage, we focus on a small data set so we can use it for the purpose of training and classification. Textual information, including non-relevant sections such as external links, reference, etc., were removed from the Wikipedia, and we only collect the text that describes the biography of the person. Then we collect a team of human taggers that we work in the summer with them, and using the Inception platform, which is a platform for semantic annotation, and it's very helpful for natural language processing tasks. I mean, for this type of when you have to work with human taggers, and for each event was tagged 3 times by 3 different peoples, and this process kind of gives us a lot of feedbacks on what is an event, right? And how can we shed light into this idea of interpreting and working or with kind of imagining this global history through the small events that we are creating or we are recognizing, right? We were able to classify over 8,000 events, direct and indirect, and 2,000 sentences that are not events. We were able finally to consolidate an event database with 2.6 million events. And with those events, we were able to add or augment information using parts of the speech tagging, using name entity recognition to kind of give context around the events. And we were able to create a sort of a structure, like which is the goal that we're working currently right now, in trying to use all this information to create or to generate further narratives. Also, we are working into expanding the classification data, but because it involves human taggers, or we're also trying to improve our machine learning algorithms in the classification process. The further guidelines or the further stages that we're planning to work on is working in the theoretical framework or on the events and relations. Also, there's a lot of work done by the Event KG project, where we think that with this perspective, we can contribute to that a lot. And the method, kind of formalizing the methodology and make publication is the stage that I'm working on right now. And also conceptualizing the understanding of global history through small events in the life of important people, what kind of tools we can use and what kind of algorithm we can use to generate or predict the future is what we are looking forward to. And also working in a small case study about the Canadian culture and narratives. We're thinking about collecting all the information of Canadians in the Wikipedia and see what can we used Canada as a small case study, or not so small, but as a case study to kind of work with these algorithms in terms of predicting the future. Okay, and yeah, we've been also talking about this idea of the events, units that allow us to index the complexity, right? The complexity of the global history. And also expanding probably this work to fictional narratives using data from fan fiction and similar platform with that have data available online. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just let me qualify, quote unquote, the predicting of the future. We predict the next 10 seconds or so if we are lucky. So
yes.
It's a manner of speak.
Yeah, thank you very much. I see a hand going up, like Mikhail Tom.
Thank you. It was really interesting and impressive volume of information and work. But frankly, the part I'm not sure I understand is what sort of analysis you want to put on top of this. So you basically, as far as I understood so far, you explained generation of a very sort of large and interesting data set, but how, for example, what you exactly mean by predicting the future using this data set, or more generally, what sort of questions can be asked about it further on? Please elaborate.
Thank you, Mike, for the question. Yeah, it's kind of it's more working towards creating a structure or data, in this case, a knowledge graph, or augmenting the knowledge graph that already exists, because there's a lot of data annotated in Wikipedia, but it's kind of collecting all these data that it's around, and also adding events from biographies from the Wikipedia, identifying those events, small events. A small event can be, for example, Marie Curie married Pierre Curie. Probably that's not an event, that event doesn't have a Wikipedia page, which is most of the solutions that are working towards this idea right now, work with events that are already classified as events in Wikipedia. So we think that we can add an extra layer of characterizing this topic, or we can add more data and more knowledge by identifying these little events that also have a huge impact in global history, right? So when I mean predicting the future, is kind of like the way in saying that if we can use this information to generate new narratives, to generate new, in the case of Canada, for example, okay, can we say that if we learn from the historical participation of Canada in the Olympics, for example, can we say that in those events, is there any patterns, data patterns that we can learn from that help us to identify or to kind of predict or shed light into the future participation of Canada in the Olympics? Of course, there's a lot of elements that work on that inside in the real results of Canada in the future Olympics, but probably we can learn some data patterns on some behavior that we could use for decision making and this kind of characterizing what possible outcomes we can have according to a certain event. Don't know.
Thank you. Mark Metz.
Yeah, thank you. It was exciting project, like the previous projects also. I was wondering, what do you mean by this indexicality of an event in this context? Could you clarify a little bit, like the Deixis part?
Yes, this is an idea of, I think Juan-Luis can explain better this, because it comes from his theoretical background. but it's an idea of kind of using the event as a point to index or to connect different types of contexts. For example, when we the index in the language. I think Juan-Luis can explain better this.
So in the sense that it's like the central thing in there is event, and the event starts to like point of other things. So this is the connecting thing that indicates everything else in a way.
Yeah. Yes, it's kind of connecting different types of contexts. For example, in the language, when we use indexicality, until we point towards the index, we don't know what's going on. For example, I don't know an example. I cannot come up with an example right now. I don't know why, but okay. Using the events or connection of events to kind of describe completely a context and give and using the event as the index, we can understand that this is the context that we're talking about, and it's particular this and not other scenario. Juan-Luis?
Yeah, Mark, we are working under the assumption, the hypothesis that in a digitally mediated reality as the one where we're living, the deictic function of language is predominant over others. Because of the speed of information exchange, and also because I think the influence that marketing is having in shaping up, I'm going to call it quote unquote reality. So but basically what we are seeing is that without the need to have a very strong semantic relationship to the world, most of a great deal of the language that is generated through digital media, through digital tools, is basically with the effect of pointing out at things, and just that creates the possibility of mapping constellations of indexes and if you use the metaphor of the network, map those as kind of networks that point to what exactly and how do these constellations evolve. I think it has become a very pragmatic type of language, very marketing kind of infused type of language, in which you only have to point at something for that thing to exist, even if it doesn't exist or doesn't have any entity behind it. Or so that's why what we're trying to do is to figure out, okay, what type of constellations are being built if you put together this type of events, micro events in the Wikipedia.
Yeah, thank you. Clarified, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd like to add like a number of things because I sort of feel guilty about these streams of research dealing with biographies for Wikipedia a little bit, having the science paper of people moving from birth to death location. So you put important in quotation marks. There is a kind of thing, there's a project which was a follow-up to the project we did in 2014 in science, which is called the Network Framework of Cultural History, where we looked at 150, 120K people moving like several data sets from their birth to their death location. So there have been multiple critiques. One is we like the paper calls it notable people, okay? I tried to unsuccessfully convince my co-authors, the editor and the reviewers that it should be called noted people, because if you're in Wikipedia, or Freebase in that case, you're noted, you're not notable, you're not important. But the problem was that there was this other project that sort of like was also very popular, the Pantheon project coming out of MIT by Cesar Hidalgo, who was actually sitting when I developed my project, like right beside me in the same room. And so his sort of like, sort of attempt to make a better project was to focus on truly notable people who appear in 28 languages in Wikipedia at the beginning. And the effect of this was that the number of people went down by an order of magnitude. So he had 10,000 people in the first version, if I remember well, while we had 120,000. And therefore, you couldn't see the kind of same statistical patterns with the same sort of like significance. And so there's this trade-off. Like if you sort of like go into more detail, you sort of buy in more detail. For example, you could say, in this case, number of events per biography, but you lose orders of magnitude of people. Like, you know, it's like you need to be aware, like everybody needs to be aware, there's millions of people in Wikipedia, but for most people, we don't know anything but their birth date. For 15% of those, we know the birth date and location. We know the death location and the death date. So you don't have a longer biography. Now, for 15% of those, that already we get like small numbers. You get like actually some kind of thing that resembles a biography where somebody in between either married or got a Nobel Prize or whatever. But one thing that will never, ever go away, you will never, ever have the full story. This is like, even like, you know, even if you have a cancer patient and you have the full report of like any machine readout, every pill they have taken, every doctor they have seen, every kind of like reporting, you will not get the full biological process that's the human life of that patient. And the same is true, even verse so for Wikipedia biography. So the second critique out of the notable, mainly that we cut out everything except for birth and death, sort of will always stay valid, no matter how much biographic information you actually collect. And so there's a neat thing, which I'd like to sort of like emphasize, which is not in the paper, but it's implicit. Why do we look at birth and death? So there's like two kind of radical extreme things going on. Your birth is random. Okay, so you are born somewhere on the planet. Like you say, yeah, the key thing is this paper brings you the evidence. And where you die is not random, obviously within bounds. If you're not sort of like, you know, if you're a good organist and there is no organ in your visibility or the opportunity to learn that organs even exist or to learn how to play an organ, you will not become an organist. But if this is in your visibility, if you're living in a country where there is organs in churches and everybody goes to church, you know, your probability that you will die in a place as a good organist where there is a good organ is pretty high. And so that is sort of like was the magic trick of that sort of paper. And what's very important, it was not about individuals. It was about cities and locations. So there's locations where people are born in and they go to. So in a similar way, and I think that's the interesting thing. So I think your project is amazing. Extracting events out of Wikipedia is an unbelievably difficult enterprise. You can do it in different ways. You've shown this thing where, you know, they have World War II as an event, but there's a lot of things going on. But, you know, I don't know, my grandfather's jumping out of an airplane and surviving it without a parachute actually happened. Nobody's interested in it. It's not a noted event. But for him, it was probably the most important event in his life because he didn't have kids before. And so that kind of stuff is sort of something which, you know, one needs to trade off. That my grandfather is a small event in your sense. That's a point in time where it happened. You can reduce it very easily. And doing statistics about these events may be much more easy. So your thing is legit, just as this other project is legit, but they will have different results. Now the key question is indeed the question that Mike was asking was to say, oh, now that we have all the data, and I think this is a very important thing, it shouldn't be diminished what you're doing. It's amazing what you're doing. But there is now the opportunity to say, oh, actually, what are we doing with this? Like, how do we measure this? The standard way humanists approach this, that a biography is sort of jumping from point to point with some kind of like a temporal sequence, that is a really dangerous thing because then you fall into the fallacy that you don't know what happened in between. You don't know if somebody traveled back and forth between Guam and Freising in Bavaria 50 times, or if he went there and on the way, there's like nothing happening. You don't. And so then the key question is, how do we deal with this? And there, I think the very logical answer, and this is sort of something why I point this out in this room, is to bring as many people together as possible who can think about these kind of things, who know their deal with networks, who know their deal with time series, who know their things with causality, would be very, very, very cautious regarding this. It's better to think about the distribution of events in time first and then think about how they're dependent about it, because anybody who worked about time series and event series in history knows that there's 2 orders or 3 orders of magnitude more information about what happens contemporarily at a given point in time than to say this is dependent on X and this is dependent on Y, because even in our own circumstances where we know a lot about like who surrounds us, what we brought into the situation, how much money there is in the bank account, whatever, we sometimes don't know why stuff happens. So how do we think we could do the same thing based on encyclopedia information about things that are like 80 years ago or something like that, or 180 years ago? I think this is a really difficult thing. So what is sort of the important point is database production like this, which is super valuable, and people thinking about what can be done with it is almost two separate things. That's the reason data journals exist, like Nature Scientific Data. Like what you're doing is material for that. It can be a high impact data paper where then other people can think about like, okay, what's the evolution, what's the dynamics and stuff, and so on. And so it's a two-step process, but it's a super, super hard process. Like I was super lucky that Denny Hillis and a bunch of really smart people came up with this thing called Freebase, the data integration normalization throughout all the double entries and stuff like that. Like there's a combined amount of like 15 years of work of like 50 people going into this kind of thing. And I could get along. I was like, okay, I'll take this one interesting thing and do my science paper. That is a really difficult kind of thing, which time should be cut out for it and funding should be given to do that. That's the key problem. But the questions to be answered, that is really hard. Like, here's a simple question. What's the trajectory's length distribution in your biographies? I would bet that it is a sort of heavy tail distribution. Most of your trajectories are length 1 and length 2. Some of them are length 3. There's very few biographies which have 60 events. Am I right about this? So this is like something, I have no idea, but I bet that it is the case, and I'm happy to see that plot, which I think would be amazing. And that by itself, having these basic statistics coming out of your thing, if you publish that, you will get hundreds of citations because nobody else has that information. And that's why these kind of like corpus-like projects are super, super important.
Thank you, Max. Just to comment on that, thank you. That's a very important point. Like, most of it's true that there's a lot of data cleaning here, and it's very expensive project in terms of effort and time, right? And as you were saying, we are also exploring opportunities for funding and to kind of give more resources to the project and get to an outcome. It's true that there's a lot of Wikipedia biographies that it's only very short, just to mention who the person is, where he was born, and that's it. And if he's dead, if he's alive. And there's a lot of also the problem that some people are more updated than others. And that kind of give us also these huge gaps in the information. But as you were saying, I think it's worthy to invest in creating at least the first step, which is the big step of creating all this data and publish it and make people thinking about this, how they can use the data and how they can use it in the future, okay? On how they can advance the project in further steps.
And
but
so here's one hint or one suggestion which I would like to make, which is don't make the same, I wouldn't say mistake, but don't adopt the same mentality as Cesar. Because what you will do if you throw away the data, you will talk about the same people we know already a lot. And if you look at the frequency distribution, what you will do is you will lift the people who are already frequent even more. And those people, when we only know the birth, we will never know anything. Don't throw away data, but look at
I'm not.
And so that means look at noted people. Don't look at important people, because whatever we conceive as important now, in the past, people didn't give a shit about it. And so that also implies that people don't care in the future about the things we think is important. Like, think about music. Whatever you consider important from the 1980s right now, people in the 1980s probably would have disagreed. And that is sort of like a really important thing, that the fact that Wikipedia is a comprehensive data set, but biased, weirdly, awfully biased, for example, towards males, does not mean you want to do a sort of, you want to massage it to look more equal, but you want to look at it as is because you want to understand where the inequality is coming from and not pretend sort of like you can cut off something and it is more equal. It's not. Okay, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, I wanted to make, mostly I agree with what Max just said and what Yadira just said. Just two small comments. Number one, according to Wikipedia rules, the biographical articles are articles of notable people, where notable is the word defined by Wikipedia rules itself. So you can call them notable, and you, in a sense, delegating the meaning of the word notable to Wikipedia if you do this. And number two is that what I tried to look a little bit in this dev statistics in Wikipedia, it looks very much that it is self-averaging. That basically what you, if you are interested in sort of collective behavior, then having more is better than having less, because actually you have the same statistics but with larger with better quality. And yes,
That's
of
exactly
course,
the case, yes.
creating the data set is a huge task, which is valuable in itself, without any doubt.
Mm-hmm. Do you feed it back into Wikipedia, actually?
Not yet.
Sorry?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet. But we don't want to end up with Jesus Christ and Confucius, as Caesar did with his work. Like, these are the two most important people in the whole history of humankind because of the method that he used. Well, the idea is just to go as small as possible in the micro events, to even at some point in figurative terms only, not with any statistical validity, figure out how, if you are able to describe the fullest biography in terms of the most number of different events out of all these different events coming from different biographies, how would that look like? It's just, we're just playing with mental experiments and with the idea that I have to acknowledge that Yadira, being a software engineer, has insisted on us doing is publishing the database first, the database of events, so that people can use it. So as about all humanists, I have resisted so far.
But it's a super exciting sort of like thing to have such a data set. I think this is sort of like, yeah, really, really great. Do we have another talk? Because we got 20 minutes.
Yeah, we have Gustavo, who is going to talk about a couple of the projects.
Yes. If we have exactly 20 minutes, maybe I should reverse the orders of the talks, or can we have a few minutes more, or what do you think?
Yeah, we can do 5 minutes more. It's okay.
Okay. So let me go with the first. Let me share the screen here. Okay, I will, since we are relatively new in, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I think it is worth to introduce ourselves, since we are relatively new in this field. Well, in particular in the cultural analytics, we are working since 4 or 5 years ago, but we were working for much more time, maybe almost 15 years in, let's say, in some sense, building bridges between science and humanities, okay? I am leading in San Sebastian a program which is called Mestizajes. Mestizajes has no direct translation into English, but maybe we can translate like hybridization or crossbreeding or something like that, okay? But the idea is to explore the connections between science and humanities, okay? As I told you in the introduction, I am a physicist. I came from from the hard science, let's say. And I belong to these two institutions. Okay, I am doing my research in physics in the Material Physics Center in San Sebastian. This is a research center which belongs to the National Spanish Research Council. And we have a second institution, which is the Donostia International Physics Center, which is hosting this program Mestizajes. Okay. We are here in San Sebastian is here at the north of Spain, pretty close to the French border. Okay, almost 20 kilometers from the French border, and it is a beautiful city. I highly encourage all of you to come to San Sebastian to visit the city. And in addition, we have probably the best gastronomy in the world. So these are two good reasons to come to San Sebastian. But okay, let's go back to the work. Here we have the bay here at in the background here, and this is the campus. Okay, and we will focus on these two buildings. This is the Material Physics Center where I work. Okay, here my office is over there. And this is where I perform my scientific research, as I told you before, during the day, and during the night, I just crossed the street here and I came into this building. This is the Donostia International Physics Center. Donostia is the Basque name of San Sebastian, okay? And I came to this building in 2010 with a very strange proposal about, let's say, exploring the boundaries between, in general, between science and humanities, and in particular, between science and literature. Fortunately and curiously, they say yes. Okay, since then we have a small budget to do these kind of things. It is not a big budget, but it is enough to do many things. Okay, in particular, we started doing some international meetings about science and literature. In this case, we invited scientists, writers, artists, philosophers, and other scholars from different disciplines, and we performed a first meeting in 2011, and then a second one in 14, 17, and 21. Okay, these 4 international meetings were organized by us in San Sebastian. And in the meantime, we were doing many other activities. I will show you some of them. Okay, for instance, in 2013, we launched the program Writers in Residence. The idea of this program was to hire a writer to closely explore in a collaboration with scientists, with research scientists, the frontiers or the boundaries between literature and science. Okay, the interesting thing is that here in this whiteboard, we were working together with Eduardo, and this was our first cultural map, which was done manually. We were trying to map the connections between literature and science, and I didn't know at that stage that many years after this, I was going to be able to generate a much better map. Okay, using algorithms and data mining the Wikipedia. We will talk later about that. This is another interesting collaboration with a writer. She is Luisa Echenique. She is a writer from here, from San Sebastian. We were collaborating for 6 months. We were working together, writing a theater play. The name of the play is The Interview. And we not only wrote the play, but we also premiered the play in the theater Victoria Eugenia. This is the biggest theater in the city, in San Sebastian. And we also published the play in a bilingual edition in English and Spanish. Okay. We also explore the creativity in general, and in particular, the scientific creativity from a literary and artistic point of view. this was a work with the photographer. She was Paula Arvide from San Sebastian too. And we make a photographic exposition and a photo book also, okay? And this is the last project I will present today. This was a book which was published in Spanish and then later in English. The name is Notes. As you can imagine, this is a kind of complex network about let's say, entangling sciences and humanities. The idea was to talk about these STEM subjects, about metaphor, about complex networks, about perception, about memory, about emotion, and so on, but from many different points of view. Okay, the idea was we have in this book, we have close to 90 texts from close to 90 collaborators from all around the world. And we have here artists, scholars, scientists, and writers talking about all these subjects, okay? These are all the authors, okay? You can see here some people that probably you know. Here we have some, for instance, we have Roald Hoffmann here. Roald Hoffmann is a Nobel Prize in chemistry, but curiously, he contributes to the book with a poem that talks about memory. Okay, this is a very nice hybridization, let's say. Okay, and we have probably Roger Molina here from MIT, or well, here we have a very important researcher from Canada, and many other people that probably you know, okay? So these were the kind of activities we were performing, let's say, during almost 10 years. And at a certain point, maybe it was in 2019 or so, I decided that I wanted to be here today in this workshop about cultural analytics. So I thought, okay, we have to move towards quantitative research, okay? Because what we were doing until that point, it was very interesting, very important, but it was a kind of qualitative research. And as I told you, I am a scientist. I like to work with numbers. I think that we can get not better information, but different information, complementary information, and we can extract some knowledge, in relevant knowledge from the data. So the question at that point was, can we map the culture? Can we quantitatively study the interactions among art, science, and literature? I mean, what we were doing for 10 years in a qualitative way, can we study the same thing in a quantitative way? Okay, and this is the content of the second talk. Okay, this was just a very brief presentation, just to show you who we are, where we are, and what we were doing until let's say 2019. Okay, so if you want, I can move to the other presentation, and then I can answer a question if any about the both talks. Okay, so I will put the other one, and let me. Okay, can you see?
Yes.
Presentation. Okay. So as I told you before, we wanted to generate cultural map. In particular, we were interested in studying these connections between art, science, and literature in a quantitative way. Okay, so we use Wikipedia. Basically, we use Wikipedia because of three main reasons, let's say. On the one hand, because in Wikipedia there is what I call unconscious collective knowledge. Okay, this is knowledge which is buried into the structure of Wikipedia, but there is knowledge that is there, and the only thing that we need is to generate algorithms to extract, to make that knowledge visible. Okay. The second reason is that it is free and easily accessible. And the third reason is that Wikipedia has the great advantage that its entries can represent ideas, people, or works. And Wikipedia is a place where scientific, artistic, and literary ideas converge and they connect with each other. Okay, and this is something which is quite useful for our purpose. Okay, and the most interesting thing about Wikipedia is that in addition to the explicit knowledge, there is also a great amount of implicit knowledge that emerges from the underlying network of internal links in Wikipedia, okay? And the only thing that we need is to develop tools to convert this network of internal links into a meaningful network of knowledge. Okay, so that is the main purpose of this work. Okay, and it is important to note at this point that two articles in Wikipedia can be strongly related even if there is no direct link between them. Okay, for instance, two articles can be co-linked by other articles, or they can co-link other articles. And in these cases, we say that these two articles are structurally related, and we can measure the strength of this relationship using different metrics. In our work, we use the normalized Google distance, okay? So the idea is to use the corpus of the Wikipedia and the links between its articles to build a complex network where the relationships between the different elements is determined by the normalized Google distance. And in this way, it is possible to generate a cultural map revealing the interdisciplinary interactions in Wikipedia. Okay, and this is what we get. Okay, this is an example based on three really relevant people. Okay, this map is based on Einstein, Picasso, and Joyce. This is the only input that you provide to the algorithm. You provide to the algorithm the three seeds you want to analyze, and automatically generates this complex network. Okay, in this graph, each point represents a Wikipedia entry, and each line represents the relationships between those items. Okay, so here we can easily identify in green, this is the scientific cluster, okay, around the figure of Albert Einstein. This is the art cluster, and this is the literary cluster related to James Joyce, okay? What we have here is a kind of a cultural map that allows us to trace and to make visible the relationships among elements from different disciplines, okay? And the most important thing, as you know, is that once we have generated this graph, this complex network, which constitute a mathematical entity, we can quantify many aspects, and therefore we can carry out a mathematical analysis of cultural interactions, okay? This work was published in 2021 in Humanities and Social Sciences Communication. And maybe you can, if you want, you can download the article from this link, okay? But when I saw the article published, I immediately recognized the contradiction. The contradiction is that I am talking about interdisciplinary, but I am alone here. So this is not too much interdisciplinary. So at that point, I proposed to Juan-Luis to start a collaboration to explore different cultural aspects using this tool. And we were able, more or less at the same time at the DIPC, we were able to hire postdocs. Okay, Carlos Gámez was a few months over there, and Alejandro Micchio, who is today with us, was for more than 2 years. And more recently, we were also able to hire a PhD student, which is Pajalis Agapitos, who is also with us today. And Juan-Luis and myself, we are both supervising his PhD thesis, okay? And we are also collaborating with Francisco González, who is a professor of French literature from the University of Oviedo, okay? And some of us published a couple of years ago a second article where we studied the relationships among art, science, and philosophy in the Italian Renaissance, okay? This was the second paper using the same methodology, the same approach. And here you can see that if you remember the previous cultural map, you can see many important differences between the relationships between art and science. Here it is philosophy. In the previous one, it was literature. But in any case, we can observe some significant differences between the Italian Renaissance and the beginning of the 20th century, okay? So, I mean, so far, everything was fine, okay? We were able to generate cultural maps, but only for particular cases, okay? In the previous map, it was Einstein, Joyce, and Picasso. Here it is Michelangelo, Copernicus, and Mirandola. But this is not, this is a particular case. This is not how the science, the art, and the philosophy of that period interact between them, okay? So the question is, how can we move from studying special cases to depicting a full or a complete historical period, okay? And the answer is more or less obvious. We have to take many triads and to average them, okay? The idea is to sample a historical period, and this is what we did, okay? We proposed to characterize a full historical period by averaging hundreds or maybe thousands of triads, which were randomly taken from the complete set of people, not the complete set of people, but we took the most relevant artists, scientists, and philosophers of a given period, and we make triads from there, okay? This is an example. This is just part of the many triads we took. Here we have the artist is always the same. Here in this example, the philosopher is always the same, but we change the scientist, okay? And if we take this first line, Vermeer, Huygens, and Pascal, we can generate this, let's say, we like to call this the knowledge map, okay, or a map of cultural interactions between science, art, and philosophy. If you see this map, the numbers that we can get from here, the modularity, the assortativity matrix, and so on, you can see differences between this one, which is from the 17th century, comparing with the Italian Renaissance and also comparing with the beginning of the 20th century, okay? So the idea is that we will focus on studying the relationships among art, science, and philosophy. This is not the only thing that we can do, of course, okay? But we are, for the moment, working with this, and we focus on the 17th century, okay? And we took almost 500 triads, okay? And we average all of them, okay? And what we get is this kind of results. This is the normalized modularity, okay? You can see that if we take 1, 5, or even 10 triads, we still have a big error in the determination of the modularity, okay? But if we take close to 500 triads, the error is lower than 1%, okay? So we can very precisely determine the characteristics of that period, okay? And here we have some coefficients of the assortativity matrix. In particular, these are the relationships between art and philosophy, and between art and science. And in this case, in orange, we have the relationships between science and philosophy, which we can see that it is almost 8 times bigger than the relationships between art and the other two, okay? So this is, in some way, we can numerically characterize the period. We can quantitatively characterize the relationships between the different fields of knowledge. And probably the most interesting thing that we found in this study is that the distribution of the links, the internal and external links, is completely different, okay? For instance, the internal links, those within a given cluster, so that means within a given discipline, they follow a kind of log normal distribution, which is compatible with a random network without preferential attachment, okay? And for the external links, okay, those links between a given node and another node in other disciplines, we obtain a power law distribution, okay, which is typical for random networks with preferential attachment, okay? So in principle, we got some new results, I mean, things that we didn't know about how the relationships between different elements from different disciplines are connected among them, okay? So some preliminary conclusions, because this is still work in progress. We have seen that we can generate individual cultural maps, we can analyze particular cases, and we can understand for those particular cases how the ideas and concepts are interchanged among different disciplines. We can characterize a complete historical period just by performing an average or performing a statistical sampling of hundreds or thousands of triads. And we have seen in this last slide, in the previous slide, that this methodology provides new insights into the study of historical periods, unveiling unknown connections and characteristics between different elements coming from different disciplines, okay? As I told you, this is still work in progress. This is part of a much more ambitious project about how, where, and when a genius emerge, okay, in which context we can have a genius. And this is part of the PhD thesis of Pajalis Agapitos, who is today with us. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention, and if you have any questions, it will be a pleasure to discuss with you.
Thank you very much. Should we unshare the screen? Yeah. So we're actually severely over time, 5 minutes. We started 5 minutes late, so it's still 2 hours, but I think we should postpone the discussion and reconvene. If your question is shorter than 10 seconds and the answer is predictably also, we can do it, Mike, okay?
The answer is no.
Okay, good. Then let's not do it. So I thank everybody. This was a very, very exciting kind of overview. Let me again bind it all together. So we saw 4 things that were really amazing. We saw the third project, a data collection project. We saw somebody who was doing the classic data science pipeline with Twitter. We saw somebody who performed with data, like input-output at the same time. And we had the classical art science, humanities science, qualitative interaction taken to another data science project. So this is all within what Julio Tinio calls the nexus of art, science, and technology, and within the scope of what happens at a cultural data analytics conference. And we would like to see more of all of that, of any of these things, because they all sort of go together. Like even if you just write a paper with some figures, you have to draw, you have to analyze. And if you, quote unquote, just do art, you probably have to analyze and do some science and vice versa. So this is sort of like the cool stuff about it. And so it was really exciting to see a group that is going for such a long time and is so vibrant and spread across continents. So really, really cool. Thank you very much. So see you next week. And all of you have a nice week. Thank you.
Thank you much. Thank you.
Bye.
All the
Bye-bye. Thank you.
for the opportunity. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.